Millionaire Alexandre Moreau was used to having everything under control, from his international deals to the smallest details in his home. But since his wife's passing, order had collapsed. His two daughters, Sophie and Marie, seemed determined to drive away every nanny he hired. They screamed, hid, played pranks, and broke dishes. In the last 2 weeks alone, 37 nannies had come and gone, each left with red eyes, blaming the girls for being unbearable and Alexander for being cold. He would only wave it off irritably. I pay them enough to handle it. But no one could. That night, Alexander sat in his study surrounded by piles of documents, wondering if it would be easier to send his daughters to boarding school. His conscience whispered that doing so would sever the last thread between them, but he was exhausted. When his secretary brought in another resume, he didn't even look up. "A simple woman from the countryside," she said hesitantly. "Little experience, basic education, but they say she's kind." Alexander gave a weary smile. Kindness isn't a profession. Still he nodded. "Let her come. It can't get worse." The next morning Véronique arrived. A woman in her 40s with clear eyes and a tired face. She wore a simple dress, a warm scarf, and carried a worn handbag. Sophie snorted when she saw her. "Another one? How many more?" Marie hid behind her sister's back. Alexander greeted Véronique with cold politeness. "I'll warn you right away," he said, looking over his folder. "The children are spoiled and disobedient. I need order and discipline. If you can manage that, you'll get double pay." "And if I can't?" Véronique asked quietly. "Then you know where the door is." She didn't answer. She just looked at the girls, then at him, and said calmly, "I won't try to break them. I'll just try to understand." The words caught him off guard. He was used to hearing about methods, schedules, and discipline charts, never about understanding. He wanted to argue but didn't. Let her do what she wants, he thought. As long as the girls stopped screaming. When he went back to his study, Véronique stayed with the girls. They stood warily, waiting for orders. But instead she took off her coat, placed her bag on the table, and said, "I've got something interesting in here. Would you like to see?" Curiosity won. Marie took a hesitant step forward. Véronique pulled out 2 apples and a small knife. "You know, apples can turn into little animals. Watch." She carefully cut tiny ears and a nose. "Here's a hedgehog." Sophie scoffed. "We're too old for that." "Then why don't you try making one yourself?" Véronique smiled. "Let's see who does it better." Sophie tried to look indifferent, but soon she was carving with focused attention. Marie giggled beside her. "Your hedgehog's nose is crooked. So is yours." Sophie huffed and they both laughed. Just like that, the ice began to melt. Véronique never raised her voice or gave orders. She simply told them stories, how she used to help her grandmother bake pies, how she once saved a baby sparrow that fell from its nest. The girls listened wide-eyed. When Alexander left his study later that day, he heard laughter, real, clear, bright laughter, something he hadn't heard since his wife's death. He stopped by the door, hesitant to go in. Véronique was sitting on the floor, the girls beside her, decorating plates with apple animals. "Papa, look. It's our zoo," Marie called. He nodded silently, unable to speak. Everything felt so simple, so natural, and somehow painfully beautiful. Later that night, after the girls had gone to bed, he approached Véronique. "How did you do it?" he asked. "Nothing special," she said softly. "I was just there. They don't need a nanny, Monsieur Moreau. They need a person." He was silent for a long moment, looking at her. A simple woman with no degrees had done what dozens of professionals couldn't. For the first time in years, Alexander felt that maybe, just maybe, things could be mended. A week passed, and it felt as if the air in the Moreau house had changed. The silence was no longer oppressive. Children's laughter now filled the rooms, bringing life back to the house. Alexander still came home late out of habit, but now he found himself lingering in the hallway, listening to the voices coming from the nursery. Véronique talking softly, the girls giggling, sometimes singing. Even the maids whispered that the nanny had brought the sun back into the house. One evening, Alexander sat in the living room, laptop open, but instead of reading numbers and charts, he listened. "Marie, not too fast. Flour doesn't like to be rushed," Véronique said gently from the kitchen. "You've got flour on your nose." Sophie laughed. Well then I guess I wasn't rushing either, Véronique chuckled. Moments later, both girls ran into the room covered in flour. Papa, we're baking an apple pie, Marie shouted. Alexandre didn't know what to say. A pie in his spotless kitchen, where even the cook hesitated to use the mixer. He wanted to protest, but one look at Véronique's calm face silenced him. Half an hour later, the house was filled with the scent of cinnamon and vanilla. When the pie was ready, Véronique set it on the table. Monsieur Moreau, come sit with us. A family dinner is the best cure for fatigue. He wanted to refuse, he never dined at home. But Marie was already pulling him by the hand. Papa, sit down. We made it ourselves. He sat. The pie was uneven, slightly burnt, too sweet, but it tasted homey. Like his childhood. Like his wife's pies. It's delicious, he said quietly. Marie clapped her hands, Sophie laughed, and Alexandre felt something tighten inside his chest. Warmth. Regret. A longing for all he had missed, laughter, closeness, life. Later that night, he found a drawing in the girls' room. Himself, the girls, and Véronique hand in hand in front of their house. Tears rose to his eyes, not from sadness but from relief. The next morning he cancelled all his meetings. His secretary was shocked. His partners didn't believe it. Urgent family matter, he said simply. He spent the day with Véronique and the girls in the park. The air was crisp and cold. Sophie built a snowman, Marie made snow angels. Véronique stood nearby, laughing, adjusting their scarves. Alexandre watched her. She didn't look like a nanny. She looked like part of the family. Don't you ever get bored with them? He asked when the girls ran off to sled. Boredom comes when your heart is empty, she replied. With children it never is. Her words lingered in him. Everything he had built, companies, deals, houses, meant nothing compared to this simple joy. That evening as they drove home, Marie fell asleep in his arms. Sophie held Véronique's hand. I don't want this day to end, Alexandre thought. You've done the impossible, he said quietly to her. They're laughing again. Véronique smiled softly. 3 months passed. The house that once felt like a cold museum now breathed. Children's laughter filled the halls, the kitchen smelled of pies, and Alexandre spent more time at home. He no longer hid behind meetings or deadlines. He drank tea with his daughters in the mornings, helped them pack for school, and read bedtime stories at night. Véronique would tease him gently when he mixed up fairy tale characters. You've got a gift for invention, Monsieur Moreau. Maybe it's time to write your own story. He smiled, a real warm smile, one he hadn't felt in years. The girls adored Véronique. She had become their friend, mentor, almost a mother. Yet she remained modest and quiet, never asking for anything, never overstepping. Sometimes in the evenings she sat in the garden with a cup of tea, watching the sun sink behind the apple trees. Alexandre often caught himself wanting to just sit beside her in silence. One day, he called her into his study, handed her an envelope. A bonus, he said. And a proposal. I'd like you to stay, not as a nanny, but as part of the family. Véronique looked at him for a long time, then said softly, Thank you, but I have to go. He stared at her. Why? What's missing, the pay, the comfort? She shook her head with a gentle smile. I didn't come for the money. I came to help your daughters believe in love again. And now they have you. My work is done. Alexandre's chest tightened. Fear, loss, gratitude all at once. At least stay until spring, he pleaded. They'll be fine, she said softly, because now they have a strong father. She left quietly the next morning. No farewells, no drama. Only a note on the kitchen table. Take care of them. And don't forget to smile. Time passed. The girls grew calmer, more confident. Alexandre still worked hard but always found time for family. When the apple trees bloomed that spring, he remembered Véronique. That first evening, 2 apples, a knife, and the laughter that brought his home back to life. He went into the garden with his daughters, picked up an apple, and began carving a little hedgehog, clumsy but determined. Papa, did it work? Marie asked. Of course, he smiled. We have our own zoo now. Sophie looked at him seriously. Véronique would be proud. He nodded, gazing at the apple blossoms. Yes, she had given them more than care. She had given them back their family. And in that moment, Alexandre Moreau realized sometimes miracles are made by the simplest people.